On this week's episode, Adrian and I are joined by a very special guest, my good friend, Dr. David Sofer. Dave is a physical therapist, educator, entrepreneur, patient rights advocate, and lifelong learner. Clinical practice is his passion, and he loves sharing that with his patients in the office, students at SUNY Downstate PT program, and with followers of his arthritis management website, www.arthritishelp.info. Dave shares a bunch of stories about his PT career as a practice owner, as an influential leader in the NYPTA, and about his unique experience as the son of a PT legend, Dr. Roslyn Sofer. Dave's a good buddy of both of ours, and he's got a lot to say about the PT profession today and where it will be in the future. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thank you for listening to the PT Connections podcast.
Welcome to the TelePT Connection Podcast. Physical therapy information, innovation, and insights for patients and providers. Physical therapists and innovators Dan Seidler and Adrian Miranda will help you connect with your neuromusculoskeletal system, discussing how to care for every physical ailment they've ever seen or heard of, the latest digital health technology, and other fun stuff from their PT toolbox. Great guests, 21st century home remedies, exercise thumbs up or thumbs down. Now, here are your hosts, Dan and Adrian.
Today, Dave Sofer. Good to have you here with us, buddy.
Hey
Adrian,
guys, thanks for having me.
Dave and I are going to do what we always do. We talk about physical therapy and telehealth and technology, and we'll make it real fun. How you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Adrian, how you been, man?
I've been good. Been really good.
Yeah? Busy week?
Yeah. Yes, this week has been very busy. All good things, all really cool things. How about you? You back from Florida, I see? You're not talking to me on a porch with bright, sunny, background and palm trees and T-shirts?
I'm back from Florida. I actually went to Vermont. I went to Vermont for the weekend, skied for a day, and got a better tan in Vermont than I did in a week in Florida. It was like bright and sunny and 50 degrees on Saturday. Snow was a little soft, but it was fun.
Yeah, perfect skiing conditions.
It was cool. It was spring skiing conditions. It didn't have the same vibe as the usual spring skiing environment, though. Like they really didn't want people hanging out and drinking beers after après ski. It was like, all right, thanks for coming. See ya. Yeah. So I miss that. I that's one of my favorite things about skiing. But you ski, Dave?
Is drinking afterwards. I get it.
Drinking afterwards. Exactly.
I was in Stowe about 3 weeks ago. I do like a trip with my fellas every now and then, and we usually go out west, but we couldn't do that this year, so we decided to drive it up to Stowe, and had a good time. 3 days on the mountain. The first time I'd ever been there. We had every kind of conditions imaginable every single day. Sometimes it was freezing, sometimes it was warm.
Yeah.
We had rain, we had snow.
That place is awesome, isn't it?
It is a nice place, yeah.
It's
Vermont
really cool.
is great.
Yeah. I went to the University of Vermont and skied there 3 or 4 days a week my senior year. It was that's a great mountain, great little town. It's like real Vermont up there.
Still got a 4.0 that semester, right? Isn't that what I heard?
Of course. By your senior year you figure it all out. At least you figure out the game of college. Adrian, you ever been skiing, man?
Yeah. I just haven't been in 3 years.
Yeah.
2 years COVID, but yeah, it's been a while.
It's
been a while. Because I used to go with like buddies, like a group of us, and then everybody got married and kids, and it just nobody really didn't plan those things anymore.
One of those things you got to make. You got to make the effort.
Right.
Yeah. So, Dave, what have you been up to, man? We haven't talked in a while.
Yeah, it's been a bit. I'm still treating patients as always. Always going to be in that realm. Still in the clinic a couple of days a week doing my thing. And lately, though, I've been working on this new platform, kind of trying to figure out a mechanism to bring long-term arthritis care to the masses. Kind of an adjunct to physical therapy, not to supplant it.
Yep.
And still in the early stages of that, but I'm really excited to see how it kicks off.
Nice. What's your role in the development? Are you doing everything, or are you?
You know how I do things, Dan. So I'm building it all out. I do the. I'm building out the website now, and I've got the curriculum kind of mapped out, and then all the different offerings, and then we're going to launch some courses, live sessions, things like that.
Cool. Is it directed to PTs?
No, this is direct to the customer.
Direct to patients.
I actually went with the PT route in my head for a while, and I actually developed an entire continuing education course and then never launched it. Got the whole PowerPoint pretty beautiful.
That's awesome.
And then I thought, there's a lot of competition out there, and I really felt like I wanted to talk directly to patients. It was kind of more where I wanted to be. So I still have that other course on the back burner. Might happen someday. But then, especially with COVID, this kind of thought generated pre-COVID, but then COVID hit and it really felt even more prescient, more salient than ever. And so I went forward with more direct to patient.
So does it incorporate any telehealth, or is it entirely automated?
No, it's not automated at all. So what I was thinking of is, what do people need in order to overcome more kind of chronic orthopedic health conditions? What are the things that are important for them to heal? And I came up with kind of 4 categories. They need good information, right? Research-based, evidence-based information to refute, all of the fancy copper-laced braces and supplements and stuff that you see out there.
That stuff doesn't work?
So there's no data to support it. Let's just say that. I don't want to get anybody in any trouble here that I've seen. And so there's lots of information and also opinion on my blog on the site. And then that's all free. There's also a Facebook group for support and collaboration. So I think that's important too. So people don't feel like they're the only person in that boat. Also free. And then I'm developing live courses that'll be taken over, periods of 6-8 weeks, depending on the course, that are going to focus specifically on that patient's condition and or this group of patients' conditions. So It might be hip or knee arthritis or low back or posture or balance, something like that. And the idea is that you can give people the tools that they need to manage their conditions, hopefully for the rest of their lives. So when things come up, they can go back and refer to this coursework, the things that they've done, and get themselves better. And then for those that feel like they need a little bit more, there's telehealth private sessions that are available as well. But it's all tiered for whatever level of service and level of finance that people can manage.
Yep.
Well, Dave's in the right spot. Public facing.
Awesome.
I'm trying. We'll see. There's no proof of concept yet outside of my brain, so we'll see what comes together.
We'll hold you accountable, Dave.
That's what I need.
2 weeks.
Well, I mean, I think it's always a question of like who's going to pay and how they're going to pay. But to me, it sounds like there's a definite need for everything you just described. If you hit it right with the right information delivered to the right population, I think it's super valuable. I mean, that's exactly what people. I think that there've been, the CDC came out with a report about how musculoskeletal is so under addressed in our population, particularly elderly, and not everybody needs hands-on PT. They need the education. They need the right information. They need the correct interventions. But they don't necessarily need their hand held the whole time. So it sounds like that's what you're doing.
It is. And believe me, I would love to do hands-on PT with everybody. Sure. That's kind of where I came from.
You only have so many hands, though.
Right. If you really want to be able to help the masses, you have to figure out a way to do it, not to be cliche, but that's scalable. And manual one-on-one is not necessarily that way. And so if I want to try to help a lot of people, then this is the best mechanism that I could see right now to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And there are a lot of companies and a lot of groups who are in this space who are trying to do what you are saying. I don't think that they have the content that you're developing, though. I think they're trying to take some shortcuts in doing what you're doing.
I looked online. I did a little research to see what was out there before I jumped into this, and the geriatric population is critically underserved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything you see in non-medical fitness is all geared towards glamour, CrossFits, be 99% of your human potential, and I love that stuff, and I love those guys and ladies, and they usually turn into good patients somewhere along the line.
Sure.
But I treat a lot of regular folks in my career, a lot of 50 up, a lot of everyday athletes, elderly athletes. And by athletes, I mean somebody that's just got to walk 2 flights of stairs with a load of laundry.
Yep.
For me, that's athletic work, and if I can help people do that, I would love to find that niche and serve that population.
That's awesome. I think that's really true. I mean, particularly you said glamorous. I mean, it's not glamorous, but it's not. I mean, when so many PTs right out of school, they want to work with sports teams, and it's like most of the patients you're going to see as an orthopedic, even in a sports center, as an orthopedic PT, are going to be a little older than you. They're not going to be your age, unless you're in a really dedicated sports environment. Most PT patients are skew a little bit older. And, I think for me, I definitely, I drew to it like early on in my career. I recognized early on that this was the population that I was going to work with. And I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoy working with older people just in general. Probably should have gone for a geriatric specialization because I really do. I mean, that's who and what I've treated most of my career.
I had a similar track. And by the way, I think maybe my mission now is going to be to make geriatric sexy, right? Geriatric is going to be the glamour
Totally.
sect of
You're bringing
PT.
sexy
That's
back.
Sexy,
we're going to make it
to the Jerry's. I like it.
Maybe we can workshop that a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll get something.
Yeah.
Looking fine over 50 or whatever it is. But yeah, so I was an athlete all my youth, and through college, Division I springboard diver. I was a competitive gymnast, and that framed a lot of what I liked for physical therapy and kind of how I treated and who I looked at. And when I worked at a sports medicine clinic, my first job out, which was some athletes, but of course, general population. And I did the same. I gravitated towards the older adult, the kind of the normal person.
Yeah,
and somehow for me, getting somebody to shave a second off of their 50-meter freestyle time, that was exciting, but somehow more validating to help somebody be able to maybe dance at their granddaughter's wedding or something like that. They're both rewarding, they're both great, but I hear so many excuses made for geriatric patients. They're just old. What do you expect? They're kind of cast aside. And at first I heard it and I accepted it just because I was a new grad, and you kind of listen to the people that are around you. And then I rejected it, and now it just makes me angry.
Go get him,
it's
Dave.
really turned into this
old and senile,
bubbling anger within me
Yeah.
when I hear patients repeat what their physicians have said or things like that. So, kind of on a mission to get out of this, age is an excuse for any kind of infirmity.
For sure. Yeah, I think there's a huge need. I've done some of my own research in the last couple of months, and we're getting into falls prevention and developing programs in similar ways to address large groups of seniors who are potentially at risk for falling. And I guess I'm sort of skewing maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit more frail than what you're addressing, but still, as you said, it's such an under addressed population, and there's a real need. It's people who want to continue living a normal, active life and have the fear of doing that or inability to do it.
I agree. I think there's also, even in the PT world, a bit of a lack of knowledge of how to best serve somebody with chronic deficits or somebody who's somewhat deconditioned. And, you see a lot of dumbing down of exercises, I suppose,
Sure.
like knee extensions, from no weight to 1 pound to 2 pounds and do 30 and I'll come back. And there's so much more that can be done, and so much more creativity and so much more insight that can be put into maximizing the efficiency of how people move, well beyond just, mobility and brute strength. And so I'm kind of crafting that into my program, and if that winds up leaking out into, the clinical world, that would be a great, next chapter.
I think it's important to also open our minds beyond the 2 to 3 times a week for 4 to 6 weeks model, and I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because this course is supposed to not take the place of PT, but for someone with a chronic condition, they're going to have these issues indefinitely. And we all know that no payer is going to pay for that. And we know that, aside from the 1%, nobody can really afford that ongoing care. And there really is a lot that people can do for themselves. And I think self-reliance is important with any population, but especially the older population that can really feel fit and feel like they can do things for themselves. And to have, I think, a live guided course where they can do that and then be able to go back to that whenever they want to, I'm hoping will resonate somewhere in the market and really fill a gap and help people that don't have those resources right now.
That's awesome. I think that, I mean, first of all, there's Adrian and I have talked about this a bunch, about how there really is there's no real delineation between physical therapy and wellness. It's an arbitrary determination, usually by a utilization manager at a large insurance company.
Right.
But the reality is that I've always had the belief that I can help somebody, particularly someone who's older, a little older, 60s or older. I could help them forever, basically. Meaning I can help them improve so many things in their life as a PT. And it's also, if you think about it, it probably is the one area of PT where we can make the biggest difference, for the largest part of the population. The senior population is growing every year. It's like, I don't know, I don't know what the numbers are, but people over 60 is exponentially growing, I think, on per decade. And a lot of people are just like, they just expect to not be active as they get older. That's definitely changed during our lifetime, but there's still a lot of people who have not bought into it. And a program like this, you can really help a lot of people, I think.
It's, the adage that I'm getting old, even
right. I'm just getting old.
Right. It's an inevitability.
Even I say that. You don't say that yet, Adrian.
That I have to have. And I am getting old. The closer I get to geriatric, the more I feel for this.
True.
So I feel the affinity can only grow over time.
Yeah.
That's actually something that my mother, Roslyn Sofer, who's been a PT in the field for 55 years now, still practicing, still teaching. And I had my first job as an aide in her clinic. And I would kind of rib her all the time that, you're with all these old folks, right? Because I'm 16 and I think I know some stuff. And she really showed me the appreciation for that kind of work. But also she was like, look, I'm getting every day I'm getting a little closer to joining that group.
Yep.
And so I do it for mom.
All right. So some personal questions for you, Dave, since we're talking about mom. Was there any additional pressure for you being the son of a PT legend like Roz Sofer?
So I will say from my mother, no. My mother was always very, very careful not to impose any will, not to steer me in a direction. Her life's fear would be that I would choose this profession and I would hate it and I would blame her and resent her for the rest of my life. But certainly she was an influence. But pressure to fill the shoes, as it were, which is not possible. Sure, it's there. Think about my first PT job at a school, and I'm working in this clinic. I'm there about 6 months, and my boss puts the PT textbook that he has, he slams it down on the table, and he opens it up to the chapter, and he was like, was this chapter authored by your mom? And I'm like, yes, it was. She wrote the book on PT. That doesn't mean I know anything. It just means that I come from somebody that knows.
Didn't make me any smarter, but
didn't make me any smarter. Although it was a great resource to have throughout PT school, and even now, our dinner conversations are painfully boring for the rest of the family, but we really get into the nitty gritty of it.
You guys dig in.
That time. Did
you have a moment where you knew you were going to be a PT? Did you always know you were going to be PT, or did you have like an aha moment?
No, it really wasn't that way for me. It was always an option for me. I always thought about it, but I never declared. I was never decisive. Probably looking back, it almost would seem like an inevitability, but as myself in the time, I'm like, no, I'm open to anything. I'll do anything. And then I couldn't think of anything better to do. So I just wound up in PT school.
So in the words of Tupac, I didn't choose Thug Life. Thug Life chose me. Did you choose PT or did PT choose you?
For a lot of it, I would say PT chose me, but I had options. but I walked the path of least resistance on that one.
All right, cool. Do you work for a large company now? Do you miss being a private practice owner, having your own place in the world?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things I miss and there's a lot of things I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started my own practice in 2005. I was about 25 years old at the time. It's crazy to think about now. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I didn't own a computer for the company. I would handwrite out billing forms and mail them into insurance companies. I was not on top of the game. And I figured things out, eventually sold the company in 2016. And I was very excited about that prospect. The stress that comes with owning your own business is pretty tremendous. And a lot of it is the fear of the unknown. Like no matter how successful I got, I don't know about you, but I always felt like it could all end next month. Like I'm one regulation away from going under. I had a decade plus in the community. I owned my own space. I had recognition. I was building staff, and there was always this fear in the back of my mind that it could all just fall apart and very quickly and outside of my control. And that kind of low-level subtextual kind of stress, it takes a toll. So I don't miss any of that. I certainly, didn't miss it when COVID hit, and I was like, man, look at all these problems that I don't have to solve right now.
Yeah.
I can just let somebody else tell me how it runs and focus on my patients, and that's nice. But the things I do miss, certainly pride of ownership has to be number one, right on top. Like, you know that it's your name is associated with the reputation of this office, that every person is a reflection of you and their good work is your good work, and really mentoring people and bringing them up. I mean, there's so much pride that comes with that. I don't have any children, but I've heard people that do say it's the hardest and best thing I've ever done. And that's kind of the way I felt about my business. And now I've sent it out into the world and we'll see what happens.
Is that what you feel like, Dan?
Are you asking me to tell you which was harder, raising children or running a PT practice?
That's a fair question. Yeah.
They both have their unique challenges. I rarely wake up in the middle of the night thinking that some sort of regulation can take my children away from me. But as Dave said, I definitely had that nightmare several times. Meaning that it really, you just didn't know. And my real nightmare was that an insurance company I would get a letter from an insurance company saying that they were cutting their reimbursement in half, because I got that letter from about 3 or 4 of them. They said, saying 3 months from now, whatever we're paying you now, just cut it in half. We'll be paying you that going forward. And I was basically down to 2 or 3 payers that were paying any sort of reasonable rate, one of them being Medicare. If another one of those letters came in before I sold my practice, I'm not sure how I would have had enough revenue to pay everybody.
And that is something that is so unique to our field, that we're not in control, that the people who receive the services don't pay for the services. Yes. The people who are paying for the services don't care about, quality or anything. And that at any time someone can just upend your company. It's unsettling. And
it is, but that's why you have to get outside the box. And you're doing that. I'm doing that. Adrian every day he's done exploring
he's
different universes.
Man. It's impressive
outside of the box, which it's amazing. And that's another thing I've always said about PT, that there's so many things you can do with a PT degree and the experience that you get from being a PT. Last thing, though, about the reimbursement, and just to publicly put it out there, and I've said it to some people, I'm going to say it to the largest audience I possibly could, that if you are a PT working in New York, you owe Dave Sofer a thank you for busting his ass for how long? About 5-6 years? 5 years to get reimbursement for workers' comp visits, essentially doubled from 1996 till about 2015, 16, 18, 2018. 18, 19.
Yeah, like last year.
Reimbursement for workers' comp visit was capped at $61.60. $61.60. Yeah. I know that because I saw a lot of those checks.
It was the lowest reimbursed state in the country.
Lowest reimbursed state in the country, 1996 to 2019. And Dave and his team at the NYPTA, was that a committee?
NYPTA. It certainly wasn't me alone, but I was in the room.
Yeah. They finally got the workers' comp board to crack and to open things up a little bit. And reimbursement for a workers' comp visit is relatively fair now. It's over $100 a visit, and it's comparable to other states. So thank you for that, Dave. I thank you every time I see you, right?
I appreciate it. The irony of it was that finally got the rates up like a year or two after I sold my practice. So I never even got to see a bigger check from anybody. But
didn't get the benefit from it.
I'm doing it for the greater good. The rising tide lifts all ships. But it was actually a kind of a remarkable education in civics and
policy and civics,
policy and how these things work, and the arguments that you think are salient, they kind of don't matter half the time. What you think is right and just, it goes out the window because there's so many other factors involved, some reasonable, some unreasonable.
What mattered the most, do you think? Like, what actually made it happen besides just grinding and being there? And
so we almost had an increase in 2014. And they actually agreed with our position, and we're like, great, this is going to sail. And then there's a covenant put on the fee schedule that says all fee schedules have to be zero-sum game, which means that if we're going to get an increase, someone else is going to take a cut. And they were going to take that cut out of our friends in orthopedic medicine and chiropractic. And they, much to their credit, it hurt for me, but much to their credit, they fought against those cuts and they got our raise killed. They saved themselves. And then for reasons that I'm really unsure about, they lifted that zero-sum covenant. And that gave us a one-time opportunity to reset the fee schedule without having to step on someone else's toes.
Nice.
And we were able to refer to the arguments that we had made years ago that their own executive director had agreed with. And so they would be hypocritical. Now, that's impossible to be hypocritical in politics, but it would be hypocritical for them to have not had made that change. And then it went through. But there was no time that I didn't feel like that could all just crumble, because I've seen it so many times at the 11th hour. Somebody comes in,
right.
Someone has political influence, and then that goes away. So we mounted, PR campaigns and things to try to really hammer it home. Fortunately, it went through.
Yeah, I mean, when I actually heard it, I didn't believe it was going to happen. Because I had heard it was going to happen for years, and
right.
Even that last time, even when it was released by the Workers' Comp Board, they put it, press release or whatever. I still didn't believe it until someone started until we started getting some checks for it. So, big accomplishment. I know how I met Adrian. I don't remember how I met you, Dave. We met like 100 years ago. How did you guys meet?
Adrian and I. Do you remember Adrian?
NYPTA. I just become I was acting board, and I remember those every time Dave had the floor, eloquent speaker, and it was always about the payments, and always about workers' comp. We did this, we did that.
Rarely agreed with, but often listened to.
We did this, we did that. It was like every meeting. It was like Dave Sofer always had the microphone and the floor, not microphone, figuratively speaking. But yeah, that's how we met, was NYPTA, and I really took a liking to Dave because you had that motion for voting, and it was to create one person. If you remember, you vote for the NYPTA, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. I think that's where we really started to communicate quite a bit. And then we're Brooklyn Staten Island district. So
just like that, when you were like Adrian, you were like an 18-year-old PT at this time, right?
Pretty like. No,
there's nothing more exciting than when you see an enthusiastic newcomer, right?
That's true.
Because
right on.
If you go to meetings, you see the same old people spouting the same old stuff for decades, and then when somebody with some passion comes in, you're like, the future is right here. So it's always exciting when you see somebody like that. And so if you get involved, I mean, it's really great. You wind up expanding your network so far, and you wind up doing podcasts 15 years later, or however long, so you never know where it's going to lead. Yeah. Actually, Adrian, and he worked at Windsor, Kim, the owner of Windsor, her and I went to college together. So, it's kind of funny that we have these. Yeah, we actually went to the same junior high school, and she was just a year ahead of me in PT school. So
I didn't know that. Yep.
That's awesome.
And we stopped taking workers' comp right when you got that. I think like just after or just before the change, we stopped taking workers' comp.
Bad timing.
Should have called me.
It's fine.
So in your program, going back to your program for a moment, I assume a large portion of it is patient education, as we know it, right? Just educating patients on how they can manage their own care, right?
It's a combination of that, like didactic classroom type work.
Yep.
But a lot of it is, activity based, actually doing the work.
Okay, so my real question here is: do you have a favorite musculoskeletal home remedy? And there's a follow-up question to that too.
A musculoskeletal home remedy,
and it could be a piece of equipment. It could be Epsom salts. It could be,
I mean, it really, of course, I'm also a professor at SUNY Downstate's physical therapy program, so that it depends. That's always the answer. Anyone who's in PT is it depends.
Not acceptable on this show.
But as far as products go, I'm not into products. It's really movement, and for me, the pelvic tilt is where it all starts.
All right, there you go.
That's what it is, training the pelvic tilt. But
the solution to all your problems, the pelvic tilt. I like it.
PPT.
That's actually that's going to be my I'm going to rephrase that question from now on. It's going to be the solution to all of your musculoskeletal problems is blank.
It's arthritishelp.info. You can come check it out anytime you want.
Awesome. Perfect answer.
Keep setting me up, Seidler. I'll take it.
Yeah, right on. Knock them down. Knock them down. And then the flip question is there one thing that that you heard or hear all the time in the clinic that just like is nails on a chalkboard, home remedy wise, or things that patients do?
It's you're going to get me in trouble here. I have trouble with some of the trigger point stuff sometimes. Okay. Put a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball and roll it out and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. You're not doing any harm, and if it makes people feel good.
Yep.
But the idea of that as a remedy to a problem is difficult for me to be comfortable with that idea. Okay. But in the clinic, so here's the one thing in the clinic, if you want something that gets my goat, the idea that no pain, no gain, right? The idea that, we can make something hurt, that aggressiveness is treatment. These things just drive me nuts. And I heard it in my early practice, and it took me a while to figure out that it wasn't necessary, and that oftentimes I think force is a substitute for finesse, and that good practice can really be, painless.
Every orthopedic practice has that one guy who just inflicts pain on patients, and some people love him for it.
Yes. It would be a badge. It would be like, who's the toughest? I think it's mostly like aggro, like male-based practices,
Yeah, even old school males too. Like
you don't get that.
Sometimes it's older patients.
Yeah. But it's like, who's the toughest? Like, who's the toughest guy here? Who least would want to be on the table? It's like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
What's annoying is the fact that I've been pressing 12 years. You guys have been pressing more. You're talking about the same stuff that I heard 12 years ago, okay? And you're talking about when you first started. And so what's frustrating is that we really haven't changed that much. And we haven't moved the needle that far. And it's just frustrating. I was doing research on Ted Corbett. He's a PT back in the 50s. One of the first African-American PTs to be a chief PT at the Institute for Crippled and Disabled. And he brought back from Europe after the war strength training for runners. And it was like, runners shouldn't strength train. And today, when you go to a course and they tell you, you should be doing leg workouts as a runner. And it's like, your mind is blown. I'm just like, I just feel like our profession has kind of stayed in this kind of time capsule, hasn't really emerged. And I'm always wondering, what's it going to take to really change all that trajectory? Now, I agree with you. Lacrosse ball isn't going to solve your problem. You have to get to the root cause of it. There's a knot there because your lower trap is weak, because you're holding your posture here 24/7, because you're not sleeping, because you're stressed out, because you never work out your upper body. So there's a lot of different factors. But the fact that we're talking about this today is what's it going to take? Dan Seidler is our senior wiser person. What's it going to take to move the needle forward? Because I'm reading books in the 1950s, and yet today the kind of courses out there are how to reduce injuries as a runner, and it's just strength training. I mean,
sure.
Ted
Corbett was talking about it in the 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I think
back when you were a young PT, right, Dan?
I think you just called me the old guy in the room. But
I said wiser.
Dave, I'm going to pass. Dave, do you have any response to that? What will it take to change? Do you think that there needs to be a change in mindset, education wise, or in the clinic?
And this is not a PT specific problem. I think this is a bit of a human problem, if we can. But it's very difficult to reject concepts that you've been putting into practice for 20 years. So if I've been doing something for 20 years and teaching it and doing it with my patients, and then some evidence comes to refute that, it takes a lot of humility and soul searching, really, to be able to say that I might not have been a bad person, but I maybe didn't do things that were the best. And I think that is lacking in our society as a whole. But if we're going to whittle it down to the PT profession, I think probably in the education, and just to go back to reference my mother again, but it's incredible when I see her do this, because again, 55 years in the field, she's been teaching for 40 years. Any PT in New York has kind of gone through her program at some point. And she was like, this evidence, she's in her mid 70s, evidence came out. She's like, I've been teaching like this for 30 years, but I'm going to rewrite my whole curriculum now. And just like that, because her identity is not tied to that knowledge. And one day I wish to be able to be as evolved as that I could feel that way, because I dig in as bad as anybody. But I think that's what the problem is that PT came from a guru-based profession of people making their best assessments based on the information they had. And that information has been repeated over and over again. And it's difficult to break that cycle, because then you have to admit that you've been wrong for decades at a time. And that's not something that is comfortable for people to do, or sometimes in their best interest professionally. So yeah. It's difficult.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. Can you give us an example? Is there one thing that you did forever that you went to a course, or you read a research study that totally refuted the value of what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you didn't ask me like who's wrong. That used to be right. I'm more happy to shine the lens on myself. But so I came through really feeling like an accomplished manual therapist. I thought physical therapy was hands-on care, yep. Much because that's what I saw my mother do, and she was extremely successful. And then I had to challenge the notion of just joint mobilization, which for me was kind of the hallmark of manual therapy. And the idea, am I really stretching a capsule? Like, right. How much force would I have to apply to stretch a capsule? And then why doesn't it stay stretched? And it just didn't pass the rigors of my own scrutiny, and then the research doesn't back it up. Yet when you go to courses of people that are giants in the field and have made a lot of money and educated a lot of people, they still show the same videos that they managed to convert from VHS to DVD, and now maybe to an MP4. And it's the same. It literally hasn't changed. It's the exact same video. You can tell by the production value and the haircuts. So so that was a big one for me. Not that I don't do it anymore, but
that was actually a question I was going to ask. Do you still do any joint mobs?
So yeah, I do, but I don't think of it like I used to, and therefore I do it differently. I'm not trying to stretch a capsule or tissue anymore, right? So I'm not gripping as hard, and I'm not yanking as hard. I'm a little more nuanced in my care. But am I trying to move the play of the joint in a certain direction? Absolutely. Do I think there's benefit in that? Without a doubt. And these things last because they work, but you have to know why they work to be able to use them selectively at the right moments. So it's about evolution. And I'll tell you, there's no point in my career where I didn't think, I knew what I was doing. But there's also no part in my career where I wouldn't look back 3 years and be like, that guy was kind of an idiot. He's not doing anything that I would do now. And so I don't know if that says anything good or bad about me.
I think the three of us, one thing we have in common is we're open to reassessing and recognizing that 3 years from now, we'll each probably look back and be like, that guy was an idiot, because you can't possibly know it all. And of course, the information is going to change, but you have to take the best information you can get, right? The best science the best science that's out there. It's gotten better, obviously.
Yeah. But it's always
going to change.
Has problems as well. The research that comes out is limited. There's no there's no paper, there's no study that really says yes this and no that.
Right.
And it's very frustrating when I hear people apply the research in such a way. You find something that fits with your worldview or whatever course that you're selling, and you say, well, look at this, it's backed by the evidence, and it's just too thin, it's just too flimsy. So it takes time, and I think we're moving towards that direction. But if you read the Facebook message boards and you hear the combination of like real confidence in people thinking that they know what they're talking, and then real vitriol on the other side, it's a formula for not for advancement. It's just a formula for fighting, and it's frustrating. I try to not engage, but also doesn't feel like the answer, right? Like,
Sure.
Silence is complicity. So I don't know what the answer is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do want to be like we're doing here. You want to be involved in the conversation, but you don't want to. I mean, none of us, I think, wants to be in a knockdown, drag out debate over the validity of joint mobilizations and what school of thought is more effective and
Right.
better science backed than the other.
Everyone's got to lift heavy. That's what I hear a lot now.
You do got to lift
heavy.
Got to lift something.
Lift something. It might be lifting your butt off the chair. That's
Keep lifting something. That's true. That helps. So where do you think? This is a wide ranging question, but any thoughts on where the profession is going in the next 10, 20 years?
I think our profession itself is beautifully suited for the future, because we are right in the heart of what the consumer wants, what's now being kind of backed by research and literature, and what makes sense for payers, right? So consumers want holistic treatments. They want less intervention. They want to be able to know how to make themselves better. Research keeps on showing more and more that that exercise is medicine, and that moving your body is the best thing you can do. And there's no one better situated in the medical field to do that than us.
Yep.
And we're less expensive than any imaging, surgery, medicine. So you put those things together, and you think that we should ascend. And eventually we will. But if there's anything I learned from my time in advocacy and legislation, it's that it doesn't happen. There's a lot of competing forces. But with that as a foundation, I think success for our profession is inevitable. Who's running the profession, or who's doing those things, or will those things get carved away from us? Those are different stories. But the base of the floor of what PT is right now, the future is very bright.
Yeah, there definitely are a lot of forces working in the same direction as we are. There's and I have nothing against any of these professions, but athletic trainers, chiropractics, pharmaceuticals, even cannabis based pharmaceuticals, all of these things about pain management, and then of course like the whole world of exercise and personal trainers and all of that. But as you said, and I fully agree with you, that we are, in my mind at least, we're best situated to help improve the lives of an aging population.
And I think everybody's sort of chasing us professionally. I feel like everybody's trying
it's a good place to be in, right?
We're leading the pack, and that says something. We're not walking in a different direction. Say that?
It doesn't always feel that way.
We're not always at the top of the totem pole.
Right.
We're not always at the microphone. But if you look at what we're doing are the things that are being proven over and over that are best practices, and that the consumer ultimately wants more and more of.
Yeah,
sure. We've got our problems. We've got a school debt crisis. We've got reimbursement issues. All those things, but all those things aren't. Those are adjacent. Those are connected to the profession, but they're not what the profession actually is.
You're right. I think the biggest amongst those problems is an image problem, that the average American does not really know what PTs do or what we're capable of doing. And that's our problem.
But it's getting better. It's it is getting better. And it takes a bit of the historical lens to really look at it to understand, and only to reference my mother a third time. But she would tell me that when she started out, she would get a prescription that said, you need to do ultrasound at this intensity for this amount of time. And if she needed to change it, she had to go to the doctor and get that order changed. And I mean, there was no autonomy in the profession. And that's not what anybody thinks of when they think of PT right now. And I think people are more and more inclined. You see more of it on television. You've got guys like Andrea that are going to shove it down the throats of the American people one way or another, show them what good PT is. If you look at what it is on TV, I always remember like Frasier, he had that live-in nurse who was her physical therapist, right? But you wouldn't really see that so much today.
That's right.
So I think the images are getting more favorable, but the revolution takes time.
Queen Latifah played a PT and a mistress in the same movie.
Both noble professions. Which one was inflicting more pain? You see, that's the image we need to know about.
Right. Well said. Anything else you want to touch on today, Adrian?
I mean, I would actually say that our subject matter, we are leading, but I don't think we're leading where we should be. I think that when I've talked to all the CEOs of big digital health companies, their patients who didn't like their PT experience like 5 years ago, and they started their own companies. So I think now we have the debt crisis. So a lot of PTs can't start their own proof of concepts or platforms or companies because they're indebted. Some who are, I think, administrative, probably have some savings or have some money that can do it. I don't know if they're thinking about it because they're comfortable with their roles, but I really think that we're behind. We should be way further ahead. And so that's kind of what I think where like the Hinge Healths are hiring health coaches. I think now they're just starting to hire PTs, but I really think that we have a lot of work. And we have an opportunity now, to Dave's point, PTs out there who are out of work, who are doing telehealth, have an opportunity to really change the image. And not even just change the image, but do what Dave's doing, is reach the public in their homes on their digital devices. But I think everybody who's doing it well, like the Hinge Healths out there and the digital health companies who are doing what we're doing, way ahead of us. We should have been the ones kind of there, but we had a lot of issues. Like Dave said, the reimbursement, student loan debt, myself included, I had so much student loan debt that to start any digital practice was hard. If I didn't work for Reactive, I wouldn't have learned the industry, But I think that I would pressure us, and, even hopefully future positions on the APTA for me, put us really like butt to the flame, like really push us fast and hard, because other people are doing it. People who are non-licensed professionals are going to just take over if we don't.
I agree with you, Adrian. And, in a lot of cases, it's MBAs with an idea and they hire a PT here and there, and they get their VC funding, and, they're running with these digital health companies. But on the other hand, I can't tell you how many new grads I've talked to in the past year who are like, yeah, I just got my first job and I'm starting this. While I was in PT school, I started this project and I'm basically doing it as a side gig now. I have a couple of investors, I have a couple $100,000 in investment, and I have an app that automates treatment, and it can monitor the patient and send me reports while they're doing their home exercise, or whatever, or they're doing some augmented reality projects or other robotic physical therapy programs. I mean, these are kids who have, and I say kids, they're 25-year-olds who have basically no clinical experience, but at the same time, they have an entrepreneurial spirit and they want to take some of the things they learned in school and this whole world of education and experience that they have that's different than mine growing up. They're plugged in from the time they're 5 years old now, and they see things a lot differently than I did when I got out of school. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be an entrepreneur and a practice owner and write a book and do a lot of the other stuff that I did, but my thinking was not on the level that they are now. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty impressive to me.
And what's awesome is that's what I'm saying.
And they're funding too.
They're starting now, so it doesn't take them 2 or 3 years to really get to the scale to kind of reach everybody, maybe sooner. hopefully sooner. But that's what I'm saying is like, let's find that person and give them all the resources and find them all the funding, and make sure that they understand, because it's a risk, right? Like, new and enthusiastic, but maybe doesn't understand the full scope of a team and leadership and stuff like that. Maybe not. Maybe they're really like the Mark Zuckerbergs that kind of just
good time to take risks.
I think
take those risks.
The pandemic has made me take a risk and kind of forced a lot of people. So I think right now those people are out there. I'm like, yes, but they got to do it now and starting kind of thinking their feet in.
So it's not the profession that I think is at risk. I think the big question mark is, who's going to own the space? Who's going to own the profession? So through, all of my professional life, it's been mom and pop, small practices. Like every PT was a small practice, and the small practitioners, practice owners, they own the space. They were physical therapy. And, now you're getting this contraction with larger, venture-backed companies that are kind of conglomerating the space into smaller groups. Similar happened to pharmacy years ago, right? You don't see a mom and pop pharmacist anymore. Right. It's all CVS, Rite Aid. Could it go that way? And will a few big players own the space, or will you have these side fractions? Will you have someone like Hinge that doesn't need a physical therapist necessarily, but that can successfully fill a role, and the market appreciates it? And I don't hate that. I think if you can do it, good for you, because if you're taking that space, if you're serving it and you're serving it less expensive and effectively, then great. If we're offering something more as PTs, then they won't succeed, or will succeed at something else. Or maybe they wind up refining our profession to a point where it's more easy to define, so we don't have this huge identity crisis. So the big question mark is, who owns the profession in the future? Is it augmented reality, virtual reality? Is it mom and pops? Is it CEOs of Select Medical and ATI? That's to be determined. But there's a lot of money to be made, and so there's going to be a lot of people in the fight, and so it'll be interesting to watch.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. We've had an ongoing conversation about this. Who's going to own the profession? Who's going to own musculoskeletal? Who's going to own injuries? Who's going to own work injuries? Who's going to own geriatrics? Like this. These are things.
Dave Sofer's going to own geriatrics.
Yeah,
the sexygeriatric.com.
Absolutely. Look, we're all, the three of us are each doing our own thing in trying to stake our claim to the future of PT. And I think that we're each going down roads that are going to be valuable. So, we'll talk to you guys again in 5 years.
That means a lot coming from a wise man like you. I'm just saying.
Well, I live in the future, as I've told you before, Adrian, and I see good things for you. So, Dave, this has been awesome. You never disappoint. Great conversation.
Thank you,
Very
sir.
Cool. We'll definitely do this again.
Happy to come back anytime.
Yeah. Say your website again.
I'm at arthritishelp.info. And if you want to email me, it's dr.dave, Dr. Dave at arthritishelp.info.
Arthritishelp.info. Adrian, you got any?
Arthritis help or health?
Help. HELP.
Oh, I said help. Arthritis help.
Help. I'm helping people with their arthritis.
Awesome. Like I said, we'll do it again soon, and talk to you guys on the other side.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
We hope you learned some things to help you connect with your musculoskeletal system and more. Find us on Twitter at dseidler, that's DSEIDLER, and at Adrian MPT, ADRIAN MPT, and on LinkedIn, Daniel Seidler and Adrian Miranda. We'll connect with you again next time.